Hello, this is Camilla J. My project Label Me is a simple web application that predicts the job or occupation of a person based on several factors. This is simply how it works. First, once you upload a photo, it identifies the face of the person in the image and selects a group, basically gender or race, that they are in, and based on how you are classified by the application, it will return a prediction on the job you are most likely to have. Basically, your occupation. The results are evidently biased, racist, and sexist when it identifies black individuals and women. It is influenced by a biased selective picked dataset in America. The whole premise of this work is to mirror the way some predictive algorithms work. A group of researchers did something similar when they found out that a survey they shared to 20 people was as reliable as a predictive algorithm used in the criminal court system. Okay, so basically how it works is, if you upload a picture and it classifies you as white and you're a man, it will shuffle down good professions, mostly white collar jobs, and basically pick one. So it's not really predicting, it's kind of mostly a randomly picked thing to kind of trick the user, but it's influenced by bias from the developer based on the statistics and big data that he's using. So if you're white and you're a woman, it will shuffle through sexist professions for women like babysitter, caregiver, nurse, occupations that we perceive women to go into. And if you're black, it would give you mostly blue collar jobs and stereotypical jobs that people think black people are in, like athletes, being in the NFL, running, SoundCloud rappers, ignorant stuff like that. So one ironic thing is I'm kind of making a digital version of like a 65-year-old racist person. Some algorithms get away with being flawed because we as individuals are inherently biased and may just agree with the systems and do not attempt to question it because we see them as extremely complex systems fed with terabytes of data. See, the problem with these algorithms is that they also appear to be unbiased. When developers train algorithms with biased data that we individuals generate, then the algorithms will inherit the bias that we programmed in it. So when they produce results, it will just reinforce the bias we trained it with. The algorithms in these systems end up becoming black box algorithms, no one but the developers understanding how decisions are being made. One of the biggest problems is that the data used can be flawed and biased, but are still being used in these predictive algorithms. My work is a creative critique to the systems we have today, an exploration on these kind of applications and how much trust we as individuals place on them. There are many applications that use algorithms. Some are used for creative means, for example, to predict how beautiful a person is. But do we ask questions like, how does it make this rating? What faces were used to train the algorithm? Is it pushing a Eurocentric beauty standard? Was the data set biased? Is there a hidden agenda? Some are also used on an institutionalized level. For instance, Compass, a tool used in the courts to assess if a defendant is likely to commit another crime if acquitted. From observation, it would appear that it always predicts high rates to reoffend on African American defendants who had no subsequent offense in comparison to white American defendants. These predictive algorithms wreak havoc when not checked and monitored, and it is despicable that we justify their use. No one would like it if the movie Minority Report became a reality for them. So why do we not ask more questions, important questions on these systems, on whether they are fair or not? It has been proven that there's a lot of racial inequality in countries like America. So majority of the time, black people end up getting the short side of the stick and are hit the most. Due to racial injustice and discrimination, many African Americans face systematic obstacles trying to find employment. Most jobs they get have lower pay, they are unstable, and have few benefits than white workers. They also face discrimination when hiring. for their names, natural hair, and other ignorant factors employers use to justify why they were not employed. The gap between the wealth of African American families and whites have widened since the Great Recession, producing all sorts of data. Due to how hard it is for a lot of black people to find jobs, many African Americans live in low-income households. Their communities are heavily policed, they are incarcerated more than any other race. So when these algorithms use datasets that indirectly use race as a factor, which is legal, in their decision making, then it's most likely going to affect African Americans negatively more than white Americans. I simply want to show how I can use data I've picked that the masses prove to be factually true to influence the way I create the application. Okay, so for example, let's say I'm from Indonesia and I've been commissioned to make a facial recognition system to identify people stealing from a supermarket. Okay, so instead of me actually thinking of, okay, what factors to put in, probably if someone picks it up, doesn't put it in the bag, but puts it in an unknown bag, or if I could simply put if they're walking in a certain way, looking in directions, or I could make it if it could study the walking path of a regular shopper, and based on that, if someone would look distressed, it would put a red marker on the person. But I could also just look at the crime stats in the country or state. Let's say there's already that stigma or statistic of African Americans being 13% of the population, but committing 51% of crime. So if I notice there's a high population of Black Americans, I could simply put, okay, since there are a lot of African Americans, they're probably the ones most likely to be the ones stealing because of the stats. So if you identify a Black person, put a mark on them and alert security. And doing that just adds more bias because it's a clear example of how our biases in real life leak into our systems. There are lots of African Americans who are followed around the store anytime they walk in. So something like that would just keep reinforcing that belief that Black people are more likely to steal than any other race. And it also overlooks other people who could also steal, but would focus on one group of people especially. And systems like that should not be used. So I simply want to show how I can use data that I've picked that the masses prove to be factually true to influence the way I create the application. So I plan to hardcode extreme bias into the application and observe if individuals who interact with it will notice how the system is flawed, and hopefully get them to start questioning applications similar to this one. So I aim to show how these systems can inherit bias and reinforce stereotypical misconceptions on marginalized groups. Also, to expose the biases we as individuals have in ourselves, if we can actually identify if there's any bias in the program, or if we can actually agree with it on its outputs. I also want to raise awareness for fair and equal AI for everybody. I want people to start asking companies how these algorithms are learning, how they are coming to a conclusion. Is it a complex string of factors, or is it more of a binary prediction? Because many companies try to cut costs by acquiring cheap data, which may do its job, but cause more problems in the long run for individuals and the company itself. Companies should not be able to hide behind big data, statistics, and the complexity of their algorithms to justify why their systems work the way they do. I found a lot of similar work such as ImageNet Roulette, and I found many researchers who have been interested in the topic for years. Joybo Lamwani, an MIT researcher who found out that a facial recognition system could not work on her face until she wore a white mask, and how facial recognition technology failed people who had darker skin most of the times. I plan for my project to be accessible on the web so anyone can use it. Due to the coronavirus, I'm not really sure how I can display it, so being online is the safest option to me. I've been facing many problems with power cuts in my house, also finding it hard to work because I would use the university Mac computers, but because my laptop is quite slow, it's a struggle. So thank you for listening. Please stay in your homes and goodbye.